Welcome to the Daily Objective, day 106 of the war in Israel. We have spoken about The Guardian on this channel for October 7th. We have spoken since. We will talk about them more than we would like to, but as they say, we read The Guardian, so you don't have to. For today's show, we actually watched The Guardian because this is we're going to talk about something specific. We're giving a specific example of The Guardian, how The Guardian does anti-Israel propaganda. There are many, many examples. There are daily examples, and yeah, we're gonna. Uh, should we jump right in, or James, do you have
Uh,
anything to help us set
oh,
up the context here?
well, I have, as I said in an earlier episode, I've been reading lately, especially, I've been reading a lot of Guardian articles on this to get a sense of where the British left is on this. And it is stomach churning. It is stomach churning. We were discussing Al Jazeera in a previous broadcast, and frankly, their coverage is substantially similar. The English language, at least, version of Al Jazeera is pretty much the similar to the editorial position taken by the Guardian. The Guardian has a wider agenda. They're with their green agenda and their labor socialist agenda, they're far more. It's a broader evil. It's a broader scope of their attack on civilization than just this one issue. But they are in fact sort of England's version of Al Jazeera. If I were to compare it to the American left media, it is still worse. It is strikingly anti-Semitic in a way in which even the progressive left press in the United States is not. And just one final comment. Once upon a time, and for many years, The Guardian was a bastion of classical liberalism. Believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, it was only around World War II that it went from being what was regarded as a middle class newspaper, defender of middle class values and classical liberalism, and it went full bore labor like Britain did in the late 40s and 50s, and full bore socialist. And from that time forward, they have been truly enemies of civilization in every respect. That's just the best way I have of putting it. They've been completely eaten up by the worst ideas of the progressive left throughout my lifetime. But this is just sort of the climax on this issue.
This is Ramallah, the de facto administrative capital of Palestine, situated in the occupied West Bank, a region renowned for arid conditions and water scarcity. Yet Ramallah receives an average annual rainfall of 615 millimeters, which is more than London. Despite this, Palestinians in the West Bank receive an insufficient amount of water to meet their basic needs, roughly 80 litres a day, far short of the 100 litres recommended by the WHO. And in Gaza, the situation is far worse. As a result of Israel's bombing campaign, Palestinians in Gaza can only access between 2 to 3 litres of water
All
a
right,
day.
that's a
And this
good
water
that's a good place to stop. Yeah, so obviously occupied West Bank. They start with the occupied because why not throw it in there? It is already it is uh, already implies that it's Israel's fault, and then um, as a result of Israel's bombing campaign is a very interesting selective. You remember we did this show, and I asked you, do you know how to lie while telling the truth? So yeah, Israel is bombing, and then you can say, this is the result of that. Did Israel wake up one day and say, what we want? We want to bomb Gaza so that people don't have water? Because that's what this sounds like, the way the Guardian puts it.
Again, I hate to be the picky historian here, but I've said it before and I will say it again. Within months of Hamas taking control of Gaza, they started lobbing rockets at Israel. I mean, literally, it was just days, weeks after Hamas had taken power 16, 17 years ago. When they took power, the first thing they did was what? Lob rockets. So, if to any extent there's been a disruption in things like water supply, or if Israel has to blockade Gaza because they don't want Iranian weapons to come into Gaza, It's all, don't you see, Razi? It's all the fault of Israel. It's Israel's fault completely. If there's any water problem in the West Bank or Gaza, it's all Israel's fault. And no matter, you see, it complete, like you say, just the way they phrase it, is the result of what? Self-defensive actions against a brutal surprise attack on civilians on October 7th. And the promise from Hamas leaders that there'll be more October 7th. Okay, so if Israel can't respond at all to that, but look, folks, it's because of the continuous aggressive hostility from radical Palestinian groups like Hamas, and by the way, the Palestinian Authority's sanction of these groups that causes any of these disruptions, any and all of them. It is not as though the Israeli government wakes up every morning and says, how can we disrupt the basic infrastructure and supplies of these people? It's a direct response to the violence that Israel has been facing now for decades.
Thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat. Bonnie says, thank you for doing shows on the weekend. Yes, the Daily Objective, by the way, will continue to be a 7-day-a-week show going forward. I don't know if I've announced it, but if I haven't, consider that the announcement. Yeah, there's this I forgot to mention this in my intro, but this series by The Guardian is called It's Complicated. And this is something the left. Daniel, is the video playing or am I just behind on I think I'm behind on YouTube. Yeah, it's called It's Complicated, and it's there's this thing on the left where they really look down on their own audience, and I think just naming it's complicated. Look, it's too complicated for you people to understand it. So the Guardian is here to explain it to you in simple terms, and the simple terms are Jews bad, people fighting against the Jews good. That's
just a little editorial guidance to the Guardian. You know, when you stick to the truth, it's a whole lot simpler. And when you're not trying to justify horrific atrocities, as they routinely do, it would really simplify matters when you don't have to, stand on your head to deny facts or morally justify atrocities like October 7th. Yeah, I imagine that is a lot more complicated than sticking to the truth and defending, fundamental value of human life.
all right. It is Saturday night here. Let's have some more fun and watch some more of the video.
Safe to drink. Even before the current conflict, 97% of Gaza's water was unfit for human consumption. In contrast, Israelis have access to an average of 300 litres of clean water per day. This stark imbalance has its roots in how Israel took control of the region's water, and by doing so, created an unprecedented health crisis.
Daniel, if you can pause it. So
Israel created the unprecedented health crisis. Israel created it. They're the sole cause. Don't you know? They have 100%. In fact, there's no other causal factor that we could. What might be another causal factor there? Huh?
They also said, by the way, they said Israel took control of the region's water supply or something like that, and then created this unprecedented crisis. This is all Israel from this. This is Israel, just choosing to create a crisis. There is no way to listen to that video if you're going to take them at their word and hear anything other than Israel only exists for the sole purpose of causing misery to these poor, innocent people who have done nothing wrong and yet are suffering.
I'm absolutely convinced, listening to stuff like this, that Great Britain has not overcome its medieval anti-Semitic past. This is Jew hatred right here. This is that blood libel stuff we're talking about right here, nakedly. What they're asserting is that Israel wants to create a humanitarian crisis. Now, the fact that Israel is the one that builds nearly all and has built nearly all of the infrastructure in the region, they're the ones responsible for the fact that there's any electricity, that 90% of the water, any sewage at all. And you ask yourself, why does Israel have superior infrastructure? Well, they're getting attacked all the time too. They're getting attacked all the time. Oh, but Israel is a kind of place that actually gives a crap about the situation of their civilians. When you add to it the fact that, yes, the suffering of their own civilians is the very strategy of Hamas, then you can really feel how the Guardian is just a useful idiot for Hamas and all that. They're repeating, in effect, the terrorist line verbatim, with the implicit accusation that Israel wants there to be suffering, wants children, Palestinian children, to be having insufficient water or polluted water. Really, that's what they think. That's what they think. No, all this crap. When I've come to the conclusion now that when they use words like genocide, apartheid, and all those other lies, occupation, you name it, it's projection. It's projection. They want to commit a genocide, or at least permit Hamas to commit a genocide against Israel, and so they are just simply projecting and assuming a genocidal attitude, the same genocidal attitude that they must truly have.
There's no doubt that what they want is a genocide, because that is what October 7th was an attempt at. It was not successful enough, although, tell that to the families of the people killed and kidnapped. But
and there's still 130 some hostages. I can't tell you, every time I get one of these Guardian reports, they refuse to remind us, Hamas is still holding children hostage. Do they ever mention that?
yeah, they're holding. It's not just they're holding people hostage. They're also, we hear about Palestinians having been displaced from their homes. We don't hear about hundreds of thousands of Israelis who can't come back to their homes because they're surrounded by savages who want nothing but to kill Jews. You don't hear that. You don't hear about the rockets. There's a lot in the Guardian that you don't hear. You just hear that when Israel responds. Yeah.
IDF deaths because of the surgical way in which Israel does their thing. The Guardian's approach is it's a war crime if any civilian dies and it's Israel's fault, even if it's purely accidental, fog of war, that kind of thing, like those hostages who were killed. The idea that Israel would want to kill those hostages is insane. Now, on the other hand, when you compare it to like October 7th, the murderous, savage, sadistic intent that is revealed by the events on October 7th, no. That's not Israel is the war criminal, don't you know? And that is the uniform perspective of the Guardian in all of their reports.
Israel controls the two main aquifers in the occupied Palestinian territories, underground bodies of rock which hold large deposits of water. The biggest of these is the mountain aquifer, which spans much of the West Bank and parts of Israel. According to the Oslo Accords, the mountain aquifer was supposed to be managed with an equitable utilization of joint water resources. But this was never adhered to. Israel takes around 80.
So a couple of things. Again, they say occupied Palestinian territories, which is, that's a step up from just occupied territories, because they were never occupied from the Palestinians. There was no Palestinian state. They were won in a war initiated by Egypt and Jordan. But yeah, second point there was the Oslo Accords, and that this point was not adhered to. Again, was there anything else in the Oslo Accords that was not adhered to? And because this was not mentioned there.
No. Again, it's all one-sided. They will ignore any inconvenient fact. If the Palestinian Authority says up yours on the Oslo Accords, that doesn't get mentioned in any way, respect at all. If Israel, now mind you, Israel defending itself, as I say, continuously from rockets being lobbed, if they do things, that of course is a war crime. That shows their genocidal intent, don't you know? No, it is ugly anti-Semitism. Great Britain, my friends in the United Kingdom, a country I love. I'm an Anglophile, I'm a Britophile. I love you guys. Medieval anti-Semitism has never left the shores of your green island. Okay? It's ugly. And the Guardian is one of the most despicable voices of that kind of atrocious hatred of civilization, and specifically the Jews, because they represent civilization. It's that clear, ladies and gentlemen, especially with a report like this. I mean, it's as if they're signing that very confession, as far as I can see.
Yeah, by the way, I haven't watched the news from London today, but it's Saturday, so I'm assuming that medieval anti-Semitism is blocking the roads in central London as it does on Saturdays. Thank you, Stephen, for the super chat. Let's continue with the video.
was never adhered to. Israel takes around 87% of this water for its own citizens. As far back as June 1967, Israeli military authorities set about consolidating control over all water resources, infrastructure, and distribution.
All right.
And-
That's an important.
That's an important
I mean,
place in history.
we're kind of repeating ourselves when we go back to this point, because the Guardian is repeating, although they spread it out to different times in Israel's existence, they are repeating their same way of intentionally lying. So what was said right here, I have it somewhere in written form. What was it? As far back as June 1967, Israeli military authorities set about consolidating control over all water resources, infrastructure, and distribution. June 1967.
That arbitrary
People in the military woke up and said, "Okay,
Yeah.
now we're gonna. This is how we're gonna just
No
randomly."
other causal factor is connected to any of that, you see. It just sort of happened, at this time frame. Do you suppose there was something else that might have been going on at this very time? Like Israel getting invaded? Like Israel getting completely invaded with an aggressive assault from different areas, all corners?
Yeah, by the way, 1967, they weren't invaded. Israel preemptively acted and managed to kind of. That was
I'm sorry. It's on the
1973.
eve. I'm sorry. It's on the eve of them
Yeah.
being aggressively invaded from all sides. Yes, of course. But of course, there's no connection with what's going on in the late 60s to this, plot by those Israeli military officials. No doubt they would say that any attempt to preempt or protect themselves from the invasion that was coming, such as cutting off water supplies, is genocidal intent, could have nothing to do with self-defense. No, it's despicable. It's despicable the way they did drop context, forget history, don't tell you the wider context at any moment. That's essential to it. And I guess that also makes it more complicated, Razi. Because there's this inexplicable, hatred of babies on the part of Israelis.
Yeah, and I'm all for, when something is complicated, you simplify it. You just focus on the essentials, and they are focusing on the essentials.
They're essentials, I guess.
Forget about the fact that Israel is surrounded by countries that on the morning after it declared its independence attacked them and have never given up hope of finishing the job that Hitler started. This is what they exist for, especially the Palestinians, because this is their the reason for the creation of the so-called Palestinian nation. So yeah, we're completely ignoring the fact of what happened. I mean, that just they were stepping it up throughout this video to this point of denial of what it was that happened in June 1967 that was a game changer. Now, luckily, it was a game changer in favor of the victims in the Middle East and not in favor of the savages, which the Guardian is, as you mentioned, a propaganda arm just like Al Jazeera, but without the excuse of being the network of a totalitarian regime. Yeah, they are free. They are free to be on the right side, and yet they choose. This is very clearly what they believe.
Think of the mentality. The IDF sends leaflets in, sends warnings in. We're going to bomb here. This building is going to be bombed in a matter of hours. And so they send in all these warnings. They send text messages. They drop leaflets by the thousands. So you really believe that a nation that engages in war like that, it wants Palestinian children just to have polluted water so they can die. That's the implication of this. It's disgusting. It's obviously anti-Semitic hate on the face of it, dripping with mind you, educated British writers are dripping with this kind of one-sided ethnic tribalist hatred. That's the only way I can interpret it.
The restrictions remain far-reaching. Israel controls the collection of rainwater throughout most of the West Bank. Palestinians are prevented from drilling new water wells, installing pumps, or deepening existing wells. Rainwater harvesting systems owned by Palestinian communities are routinely destroyed by the Israeli army, as are other water infrastructure and facilities. In Area C, the territory of the West Bank under full Israeli control, more than 270 water and sewage facilities used by Palestinians have reportedly been demolished in the past 5 years.
All right,
on the
let's
grounds that
let's
the
pause
infrastructure.
here. Let's pause here just for a second. Again, would there be any legitimate reason except, genocide for Israel not to be thrilled about Palestinians, drilling holes in the ground? Can you think of anything, James? I mean, for
Well,
me,
now,
for
I
me,
was
it's complicated, so maybe you can decipher it.
well, we all knew that there was an extensive tunnel network. That they live, they have their military facilities. That's where the hostages probably are. Isn't this extensive? I did not realize the extent to which there's this sort of labyrinth of tunnels that the Palestinians use for their own attack purposes. That is, on the face of it, a complete ignoring of why it is Israelis might, in fact, be suspicious of Palestinians digging in the ground. I would also, just as a smaller footnote, I live in Southern California, where we have a similar aquifer type system. It is ignorance of how water works. If you interfere with anyone who tries to dig into the aquifer, is affecting the entire system of water. Yes, there are certain places where naturally water collects in semi-arid regions like Israel or Southern California. And yeah, so there's water here for sure. But if you independently tap into the aquifer, you are actually you're changing the water system for everybody. So that's just a technical point on aquifers and water systems. But think about it. The point you make is so devastating. Why do you imagine Israel and the IDF might be concerned about Palestinians digging deep holes in the ground? I can't think of a reason. It's insane.
On the grounds that the infrastructure is illegal. High demand and limited access for water means that more than 80% of the annual water supply for Palestinians in the West Bank is being purchased from Israel at a much higher cost, even though much of it has been extracted from the mountain aquifer in the occupied Palestinian territory. In contrast, Israelis living on illegal settlements in the West Bank enjoy an ample water supply, allowing vineyards, olive groves, farms and date plantations to thrive.
All right, this is a good place to pause. By the way, I'm not sure we'll make it through the whole video. We might. I don't know how far in we are, but
I don't think I can emotionally make it through. Oh, you see, productive Israelis who are creating farms and are doing something with water, right? The Israelis want to make the place a productive land where that produces food, where people can live and have jobs. Since that is not the goal of the Palestinians in any way, shape, or form, this entire presentation of it like that is utterly perverse. Utterly perverse.
Yeah, by the way, Daniel says we're about halfway through, so we're not going to make it through the whole video, but we will provide the link in case you want to watch it and enjoy it. You can play it on a loop. But yeah, a couple of things they said there. First of all, again, occupied West Bank, illegal Israeli settlements. They're throwing in all those terms, and the thriving. By the way, the thriving farms and vineyards. We keep hearing about Israeli settlers attacking and destroying Palestinian vineyards, which, by the way, I am not sure is not true. I'm not a fan of most of the settlers, as I've mentioned, although I am 100% behind their right to be there. But yeah, I mean, what are they destroying? They're so if only the settlers have these vineyards, what is it exactly that they're destroying? But again, it's complicated. James.
Yeah, complicated is the word when you're trying to make justifications for monstrous activity like this. When you're ignoring the facts that Israel is defending itself, when you're ignoring the facts that Israel is the one building infrastructure and growing farms. I didn't mean to say that there were no farms. That you're absolutely right. Many of the Jewish settlers are religious extremists, and I understand some of them engage in violence. I'm not going to deny or diminish any of that. But I'm just going to point out that in essentials, the basic thrust is Israel is trying to make this a fertile, productive land. The Palestinians are trying to kill Jews, ladies and gentlemen. Their raison d'etre, their telos, if I can use the philosophical word, their purpose, their end, their goal is the destruction of Israel. Israel's purpose is to live and to feed their people. It's really rather vile the way this is presented, just in general. And I think if I was going to summarize this sort of thing, if you, the rest of you folks have the stomach to go through and continue, you've gotten the basic gist here from us. Just remind yourself of the sort of things that Razi and I have just said here. It'll inoculate you from the vile and disgusting lies that you will continue to hear. But then again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to predict that just about anything you read from The Guardian, which touches on anything in the Middle East, is going to be a vile, despicable lie.
Yeah, and so I haven't actually shared this article with you in advance, but it's kind of related. It is from The Guardian. I want to read a little bit of it because we've talked about how the Palestinian, we did a whole episode on the Palestinian propaganda machine. We've talked in other episodes about how it works, about how the anti-Israel crowd in the West uses information, uses so-called experts. So I want to read a little bit from a Guardian article from October 17th, titled "Fears Grow, People Are Dehydrating to Death in Gaza as Clean Water Runs Out." UN agency warns residents exposed to cholera and dysentery as city's last seawater desalination plant closes. And then the article starts, "Fears are growing that people in Gaza are beginning to dehydrate to death as clean water runs out, while Israeli airstrikes continue to pound the Palestinian territory of 2.3 million residents amid a total blockade of food, electricity, medicine, and fuel." Remember, this is 10 days after the October 7th attack. This is before Israel started its ground operation. And while there was there was mostly just aerial bombardment. So then I'm not going to read too much of this, but it continues. The UN's Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, said on Tuesday that Gaza's last seawater desalination plant had to shut down, bringing the risk of further deaths and waterborne diseases such as cholera and dysentery. Later
If Hamas
on,
gave a crap about their own people, they could bring this to an end. They could stop the rockets. They could surrender. They could turn themselves in if they cared about their own people. If they cared one whit about their own people. But no, the Guardian is more interested in promoting Hamas-type propaganda to use the suffering of the real or imagined suffering of the Palestinians. That's the goal of Hamas.
yeah,
And the
but
Guardian is, of course, the useful idiot here.
But luckily in this article, they don't need Hamas because they have the UN. So later on, the article states UN experts have condemned the Israeli bombardment and blockade as, quote, collective punishment, which is a war crime. So they have an article, a news story about something that is happening, about a concern about the lives of people there. And then they tell you where this concern is coming from. It's coming from UNRWA, the people who have raised the generation of murderers who committed October 7th and who allowed it to happen and who were celebrating in the streets. And then they go to the experts again, UN experts saying this is war crimes. The same experts from the same organization that said the head of which said this didn't happen in a vacuum, meaning it's Israel's fault. The organization where in the General Assembly they voted 14 times in 2023 to condemn Israel. They voted 7 times on the rest of the world. This is the organization that the Western part of the Palestinian propaganda machine uses as experts. So when these people tell you this is coming from the experts, look at who their experts are and ask yourself what is their goal.
Well, for all we know, it could be a Hamas operative working for UNRWA, who's the expert who's talking this, because UNRWA employs Hamas personnel. They have been caught doing just that. And if the if the Guardian is implicitly anti-Semitic, and not so implicitly sometimes, there are whole nations, vast voting bloc in the United Nations of countries that are explicitly anti-Semitic. They don't even hide it. They're not even shy about it. So these experts obviously can be safely, they should at least be questioned. The Guardian just repeats it as if it's an axiomatic truth, and they don't even question the sources that it's coming from. At least in the American media, most of the time there is a, maybe that comes from this source. We'll check out that. No, nothing like that from the Guardian.
So actually, this article, the interesting thing is that this article is from October 17th. October 17th is when a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket fired towards Israel was misfired, fell on the parking lot in Al Ali Hospital, killed some people, and the immediate news that came out was Israel bombs hospital, 500 people died. This was reported as news all over the world. And since then, I think even The Guardian, when they report Hamas numbers, they say this is from the Gaza Health Ministry, which is run by Hamas. They still report it, and this is what they report as supposed fact. James, I wanna close the show with what I really strongly agree with The Guardian on. But before that, I'm gonna thank Jonathan Honig again, Jeff Bannister. Thank you all for your super chats. Thank you, NBGSTV for the super chat. They say, responding to yesterday's stream, the quote, "Stay away from Islam" is Sajid Lifam, used as a tagline by YouTube's apostate prophet. And then there's a link there. Okay, so this article that I just read from, at the end of it, as at the end of every Guardian article, you see this. So it says, I'm not going to read the whole thing again, but it says, well, 2023 didn't exactly go to plan, did it? Here in the UK, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, had promised us a government of stability and competence, not forgetting professionalism, integrity, and accountability after the roller coaster ride of Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. Remember Liz? These days, she seems like a long-forgotten comedy act. Instead, Sunak took us even further through the looking glass into the conservative psychodrama. Then they complain about the US, they complain about the Middle East. So at the end, The Guardian says, shows very clearly where they stand, tells you if you want more of our left-wing propaganda, which is, that is what they do. Then
they're not simply the voice of the Labor Party. They have 3 writers there who work for the Social Democrats, don't you know?
Oh yeah,
no. Gentlemen, they are the anti-Semitic faction of the Labor Party's voice.
Yeah, they're definitely not the voice of the current Labor Party, because they are, way to the left of Labor.
Way to the left. They are the anti-Semitic Labor, there is I think, an anti-Semitic division of the Labor Party. They're that division of the Labor Party's House organ. They're the voice of the anti-Semitic Labor folks. That's what they are.
So what I agree with them is they are saying, if you want to make the world, in their case, a worse place, if you want more, more suffering, more poverty, more terrorism, support The Guardian. If you want to stand up to that, if you want to, help wage the intellectual battle for a better world, for a free world where Western civilization, the best of Western civilization, thrives, and that is what we are here for. So I hope you continue to watch our content, like it, share it, comment. That always helps with the algorithm. And of course, if you can afford to do so and see the value in it, consider becoming a member. There's a link in the live chat and in the description. And of course, you can become a YouTube member and watch some of our YouTube exclusive content, including tomorrow's reality show Extra, which is going to be an episode about The Guardian. It's going to be The Guardian Says the Darndest Things. This used to be a segment on the reality show before October 7th. It'll be sometime in the future a segment again. We're gonna do a show where we take the lighter side, although there is no lighter side if you really look at it, but we will try our best. Tomorrow, that is tomorrow at 6 p.m. UK time, 1 p.m. Eastern. 30 minutes before that, we have the Daily Objective. Tomorrow's Daily Objective is a controversial one. I know that's not saying much typically for this channel, but yeah, the title for that is Palestinians are suffering and it is their fault. We will explain why it is their fault. We're not just this is not just clickbait. And of course, If you look forward to that, consider giving it a preemptive like. That always helps with the algorithm. James, you are on X, still a handle that I can't remember off the top of my head, but one that is
You're
in
not
the
alone.
live chat and in the
Daniel will put
description.
it there.
I am at Razi Ginsburg on X. James, thank you. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Be safe.